Welcome to the podcast series Unshakable Strength Empowering Black Women, sponsored by the Empower Project. The Empower Project is a partnership between Howard University and Health HIV, sponsored by the PACE grant from Gilead Sciences. The Girlfriends Podcast miniseries, Unshakable Strength Empowering Black Women, is dedicated to addressing the unique health challenges faced by Black women and girls, particularly in the context of HIV prevention. We will explore important topics such as sexual health, mental well-being, access to healthcare, and strategies for HIV prevention tailored to the needs of Black women and girls. We invite you to listen to our other episodes that explore topics like trauma and health disparities, meeting Black women where they are, and stigma, already available for you. Today's episode, Boundaries and Healing, Nurturing Healthy Relationships, will explore the impact of trauma on relationships, the importance of establishing healthy boundaries, and pathways to healing. This episode aims to foster resilience, healing, and stronger, healthier connections. I'd like to introduce Tiffany Barrett and also me, Ashley Danso. So Tiffany founded the Priceless Woman in 2014 as a safe space for Black women to develop and cultivate sisterhood. She's also a champion for all things women and a fierce advocate for women's wellness and reproductive justice. I am a junior at Howard University. I'm studying health education with a concentration in community health, and I'd like to go into the medical field and also pursue public health. I just want to start off, Tiffany, by just opening the floor with a question, and it's in relation to society's pressure on Black women. So, how does societal pressure on Black women to conform to narrow definitions of femininity and masculinity affect their ability to set emotional boundaries? And what strategies can support them in resisting these pressures to foster healthier relationships?
That's a good one right out the gate. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in our society, Black women, we are reluctant to often enforce our boundaries or to call out violations of our boundaries because any time we try to stand up for ourselves is perceived as masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
protection is not a masculine trait, right?
of
That is
course.
the very thing that defines us as women is that we have the ability to take care of ourselves and stand alone.
Yeah.
But for us, we have things like the angry Black woman trope or other negative stereotypes that are attached to us. Anytime that we're firm, we do not relinquish our boundaries, and then we offer consequences for anyone violating those boundaries. And as a history for Black women, femininity is often hinged on us having a complete lack of boundaries and never
Mm-hmm.
pushing back against any behavior in any of our relationships, not just romantic, even familial relationships that would be considered, a violation. So we are historically expected to accept any type of behavior that we come up against. And the stereotypes that are developed around that are really detrimental to us on a lot of different levels. For a very long time, there's been the expectation of Black women to just sacrifice our own needs, our well being, at the expense of the emotional needs of every single person around us, family members, even when we become mothers, our children. And, that extends to not just that damages not just our emotional well-being, but our physical well-being, our mental, spiritual, etc. It can be detrimental to us across the board.
Yeah, you're completely right. You're definitely right. I feel like any expression of our emotions immediately comes off as aggressive and combative. And it's a horrible way to go about life and be perceived. So I know one thing that's really important in relationships that we need is vulnerability. So how can Black women redefine vulnerability in their relationships in a way that still honors their boundaries and reinforces their sense of self that's often always shaken by society?
So I want to offer up authenticity over vulnerability. Because when
Mm,
we look up the definition of vulnerability, it literally means being susceptible to harm. And that's not what we want, right? So that's a
mhm,
good one, redefining it for
mhm,
us. And just knowing that authenticity is the key to a lot of the path that we're walking when we're walking a trauma-free life and we're living in the pursuit of wellness, right? Health is a state of body, wellness is a state of being. So when we're thinking about living a wellness full life, I want to offer up vulnerability as opposed to authenticity. Um, I like asset-based language. So
Yeah.
moving with authenticity is the best way for us to honor ourselves and honor our connections. And the best way to teach people how to treat us is to treat ourselves well, right?
Hmm.
You ever notice sometimes you'll come up against someone, or even I'll use the example of like the older women in our families. Like there's that aunt, you know, you can't call her after a certain time.
Yeah.
She's not going to pick up the phone.
Hmm.
Or maybe when you were younger, your mom, you knew you couldn't, call her to pick you up if it was past a certain hour. Those were
Hmm.
boundaries that they were setting.
Yes.
Then those things became things that people respected and endeared about their character because
Hmm.
they were firm in them. But we also knew never to question them. And what strengthens the relationship is that when you know not to push against those boundaries, in the moments that you do, the person understands the gravity of it, right? If I'm calling my mom at 11:30 at night, she knows it's an emergency and she knows to act. She jumps
Hmm.
to, action because I don't cross those boundaries in an unnecessary time. I'm not just like, "Ooh, girl, it's 11:30, there's a sale, let me call my mom," right?
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's just like I'm crossing her boundary. So when we show up authentically as our authentic selves, we show people how to treat us and how to deal with us. And over time, when we're consistent, they will mirror our behavior. It's just human nature. We learn
Hmm.
through mirroring and mimesis. And by loving on ourselves and treating ourselves well, we teach other people how to treat us.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's incredibly insightful, especially where you said that if you do happen to cross those boundaries, it's for a big reason. Like there's gratitude to that. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people are always able to express and enforce without getting some kind of pushback. So I love that you really highlighted how important it is to maintain those, especially within those family dynamics.
Yes.
And I feel like that kind of leads into the topic of trauma and how that affects relationships. So, what are some common patterns or responses that you see in trauma impacted individuals that typically impacts their relationship dynamics and emotional well being?
For Black women in particular,
Mm-hmm.
there are a list of things that we see in repetition, right? That we see quite often. So things like hypervigilance. When
Mm-hmm.
we've experienced trauma, we just exhibit a heightened sensitivity to any type of potential threat, right? The way we walk down the street, the way we dress, even, we
Mm-hmm.
will change the way that we dress, but it also changes the way that we trust, the way that we feel when emotionally when we're dealing with another individual, when we're in relationship with someone else. We are hyper vigilant about our feelings. We don't want to get hurt, so we protect ourselves, we guard ourselves, we shield ourselves. Another way we do that is in alignment with that is also distrust, like
Mm-hmm.
not trusting people. If you've been lied to, you lived in a house where like lying was second place, like it was common, when you go off into the world, because that was your experience, you think that that's how other people are. Like, oh, okay, other people lying all the time too. So let me safeguard myself. Let me make sure that just in case this person is lying, I am safe against what the ramifications of that lie can be. And not only does that, magnify distrust with the other individual, but we're also weathering ourselves and our emotions by not allowing ourselves the freedom that trusting someone and safety gives us. So we
Mm-hmm.
kind of self-sabotage
Yeah.
our own feelings with distrust and fear of betrayal.
Yeah.
The last big one that I want to give, and this is like we people say that this is one of the drivers of Black Girl Magic, is we do a lot of internalization of oppression and self-blame. So when someone has done us wrong or we've been hurt or we've been harmed, we go out and we just work on ourselves. We
Yeah.
are like, okay, I'm gonna go back to school and get this degree. I'm gonna go get this better job. I'm gonna go do this thing. I'm gonna go on this amazing vacation because
Yep.
it makes us feel like something is wrong with us. So what we
Mhm.
do is fix us, make us better, and then that will soothe the hurt, but it also proves to the other party that we didn't deserve whatever treatment that we got that caused the hurt, that caused the pain, that and reinforced that trauma.
Yes, definitely. There is a lot of that kind of like isolation, lockdown after you get hurt. And, you might have picked up a degree or two, which is wonderful, but did you actually heal from that? I feel like that's something that we don't always want to confront when we experience things like that. But that is a very, very common pattern I see in Black women of all ages. I see it right now in college. I see it in little high school girls. Like any way that we feel like we can level ourselves up, we'll try to do that in response to being hurt. But it's not always the solution. It's great for our individual development, of course, but it's not always the solution if we don't actually confront that. And then that kind of leads into my next question, which is more about how we can heal from that. So, how can individuals address or mitigate those long term effects that trauma can have on both physical health and interpersonal relationships?
I think the first step is always just identifying where we've been harmed or where we've been hurt. And I am a big advocate. My dad was a mental health professional.
Mm.
And I'm a big advocate of, seeking clinical help, again, along the lines of health is a state of body and wellness is a state of being. When we are addressing trauma with clinically, and then addressing healing from that trauma with the wellness aspect, we have a two-pronged approach to how we're overcoming any damage that may have been done, right? So when we identify, I use these what we call the three F's. So I'm finding what I need to find, finding the harm, finding the hurt, finding tools, and then feeding. What am I feeding? Am I going to feed the trauma or am I going to feed my healing? So once I find out what it is, we find a healing modality, whether that's therapy or we have build more community or we join support groups or nourishment off the plate. What are the things that we can use in our community that are pathways to healing? And then the last one is feeding. Wait, did I do feeding? I did.
Yes.
Finding, feeding, fostering. The last one is fostering. So fostering is fostering those tools that we have into a full-blown skill set of,
Mhm.
okay, I know I just went through a super traumatic event. Let me make sure that I book like a loss. I lost a family member. I may want to book out 6 weeks of therapy with my clinician. But in the same time, I want to foster feed some relationships with my family members because we're all grieving right now, so maybe I do some get-togethers where we come together, we cook. One thing about Black women, we heal in community.
Mhm.
That is what the Priceless Woman is about. Like, we heal in community. When we gather, there is something about the presence of other women and the way that we talk and we pour into each other that helps, and it just speeds up the healing process. And when we are in community together, when we leave, that effect is long lasting. It doesn't just
Hmm.
last in those moments of when we are together. We come home and we take that healing energy and we take it back home and infuse it with everyone in our household. And then the kids go to school or the sisters or the friends, and it permeates throughout the community. So using that, dual approach of having clinical help, but also developing really strong wellness practices on our own and in our community that can support us are a really good way that to ensure that we have a pathway to healing trauma and knowing how to address it and recognizing it sooner when it comes up because we're in that emotional clean space of what I want to say hygiene, right? Emotional hygiene. We have a hygiene protocol for how we're taking care of ourselves, and we know how to show up for ourselves and realize when we're in a deficit.
Yeah. Wow. So finding, feeding, fostering.
Yes.
I like that. I really like that. That's wonderful. And definitely, I feel like that also goes back to that isolation that we sometimes force ourselves in. If we're healing in community, it will actually give us the results that we need. I feel like Black women, we don't even know how powerful we are when we are in numbers and we are all just pouring into each other. Like, it's just it's honestly like an indescribable magic that I feel like everyone needs to tap into at all times as much as you can, because like you said, that's what permeates through the rest of our lives. It goes in those people that were with you when you were going through something when you were younger. Those are the people that will help raise your kids. Those are your children's aunties, godmothers, and things like that that we hold very closely. We are very much a collective group of people. We're not individualists, even though we live in a very individualistic society here. So yeah, I think that's just really, really wonderful. My next question is kind of along the same lines. It's a little bit more in relation to gender identity, but what ways do you think that trauma experienced by Black women, especially surrounding gender identity, impact their healing process from trauma? And what unique paths of recovery do you think that they need?
Um, it's the intersectionality of it all, right?
Yeah.
It's that there are so many layers to um oppression and just challenge that we face every day as Black women.
Hmm.
There's a really a really funny video that's like circulating around, and I'm so mad at myself that I didn't talk more about social media and how it's like it is a driving force.
It
It's
is.
like a driving force to so much of what we experience now that wasn't happening 20 or 30 years ago.
Hmm.
But there's a video circulating where this gentleman is talking about he's talking about misogyny and misogynoir and
Hmm.
how, you know, there's a very unique space that Black women are in because we get it from all the sides, right? We get
Yep.
it from every different side, and there's really not a place to go, nor do we have an equal counterpart that is
Yeah.
experiencing the same level of oppression that we feel that can
Hmm.
be sympathetic with us. So
Yes.
we're kind of in this silo almost where when we, coming back to thinking about clinical solutions, we have to have clinicians who are not just well trained, but they have to be not only culturally, but historically responsive to us as Black women specifically, right? Because you have
Hmm.
to understand the historical implications of who we are,
Yeah.
and, I like to go a little bit past cultural responsiveness to cultural humility and to
Yes.
be able to put everything down and look at that woman and specifically who she is and what she's experiencing and throw away all of your biases, all of your preconceived notions, because even within us as Black women, there's so many nuance. You know, my mom she's of Ethiopian descent, like they're Ethiopian Jewish. That that is so unique. Like I have not met many other people during my lifetime who could even understand like what that was like growing up, or what those values and those traditions are like, and having this to live up to that, and being a little Black girl growing up in the Bronx and Harlem. Like mommy,
Yeah.
and I would say to my mom would say, oh, you want to be like your American friends. I'm like, I'm American, mom.
I understand.
I'm
I'm the same
completely and totally
way.
American. So having practitioners that you don't have to explain that whole long path of,
Mhm.
this is who I am as a woman, this is who I am in my community, this is who I am, my racial identity, my ethnicity, right? Where there's at least some commonality, or at least the intense desire to be culturally humble as a practice, not just as a practitioner, so that they are addressing your needs where they are. When we
Yeah.
talk about meeting Black women where we are, this is where I am. Please do not try to pull me into some colonized concept of healing,
Mhm.
but understand who I am as a Black woman and what I need, and how I should be fortified to go out in the world, and how I should approach healing that may be different from someone from a different background and a different culture.
Yeah. I love that you brought up misogynoir because I feel like that is such a deep concept that a lot of people don't understand because obviously there is misogyny, but the unique misogyny that we face as Black women is just like, it is honestly indescribable sometimes. And like you said, we don't have a counterpart that completely understands because we have Black men, but Black men are still men at the end of the day. So they have a little leg up. We can't always relate to white women because they're still white at the end of the day. So we have our Blackhood and our womanhood and our Blackness kind of always in a tug of war. And I like to think that we don't actually have to put one over the other. They can just coexist. They can always just coexist. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of people that are outside struggle with understanding within us. And even like you said, within Black women, there are a lot of nuances, even just in terms of gender identity. I feel like our femininity is already always up for question, so we have that, or we're already getting masculinized, and because of that sometimes, there may be a strife between transgender Black women and cisgender Black women and things like that. Like that's where we need to come together and actually understand that we can experience womanhood in different ways. That doesn't mean it's still not Black womanhood, and it's just something that I hope that we can work towards healing together in community, like you keep saying, because that's where we're actually going to strive. And there was something else that you said that was really, oh yes, your background. As someone who came from two Ghanaian parents, I'm first generation. My parents came here, then I'm here. So I definitely understand that struggle of just, living in your cultural bubble, living in that American bubble, and then kind of having to go back and forth between them and, wanting to placate, your mother, make sure she doesn't think you want to be like the Americans, but not, straying too far from what the status quo is. So it's so interesting. And I feel like it just adds another layer sometimes of that misogyny because then it's like you're dealing with the misogyny in America, but you're dealing with the misogyny from back home too. And it's it's really insane. It's just something that a lot of people don't have to think about every day. A lot of people don't have to carry every day, but it is what
Yeah,
it is. We're
again,
Black women. Yeah.
it's that nuance. It's that nuance.
Hmm.
I always say, I call myself the keeper of the hoods. I didn't even give myself that name. My daughter did. But I call myself the keeper of the hoods. Sisterhood, and sisterhood is first because I was a sister
Yeah.
first before I
Yeah.
was, and then motherhood. And what I always say is the hood saved me. The
Hmm.
hood saved me,
Hmm.
right? Sisterhood, womanhood, motherhood, defining those things for ourselves and standing in those, and
Hmm.
making tight knit, tight woven community that's based on those tenets, right? In the way that you value them. You may
Mhm.
not, someone else may not value sisterhood in the same way that you value sisterhood, but there's still a sisterhood there, right?
Mhm.
And knowing that those things they are pillars of what it means to be a Black woman in this country. Like we have to think about, there are times when that's all you have. That's all we have is each other. You know,
Mhm.
being in college and being in a dorm with your girlfriend, and like somebody got $7 left on their food card, and it's like,
Mhm.
we're gonna split this whatever meal that we get, right? And those things they reappear in your life, just not in the same way. It happens this way in college, and then it happens this way in the workforce, and then it happens this way in motherhood, and then it happens this way. You know, they reappear, and they reinforce what is important, what fills you, and what fulfills you as a woman, and in your Blackness as a woman. And I
Yeah.
think those are really important things to hold on to when we think about relationships, when we think about healing, when we think about trauma,
Mhm.
you know, because we as Black women usually bond through our healing instead of through our trauma.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
bond through our healing, and those are the relationships that sustain you, because
Mhm.
trauma bonds, once you heal, that you don't look so attractive anymore.
Mm-mm.
But when you bond through those healing experiences, those are your friends for life. For
Yep.
life.
Yep. For sure. They definitely are. I just feel like, especially like, I love how you mentioned how those moments of coming together just change forms throughout our lives, throughout Black womanhood. Because I just feel like I'm obviously experiencing the college version right now, but I cannot wait to experience it in the workforce, motherhood, all those things. I'm looking forward to just watching the great connections that I have already just flourish. And then I kind of do want to go back to like community, like you were saying, because obviously we know we heal in community, but what specific challenges do Black women face when establishing boundaries in both intimate and community relationships? And what approaches can we help overcome these challenges?
That's a good one. Well, that goes back to thinking about like what I said about my mom, right?
Yeah.
Where her community for her looked really different for me. But it doesn't have to mean one is better than the other, or one is bad and one is good. It's like we are in a really amazing time and shifting time, where we are right now as Black women, where we are defining a lot of things ourselves. We are tired of being defined. We are tired of letting people define us, letting people put us in a box. So we are defining what community looks like for us. I keep hearing people say there's no more village. The village is going to be the village that you make. That's
Yes.
what's going to happen. If you don't have a big family, you make that village. Find your sisters, find your friends. My village during college, I was a non-traditional student.
Yeah.
My village during college was all my friends from school and a couple of my friends from my neighborhood. I was older, so it wasn't, my friends were 19 and I was like 27, married, children, right? So it's like this is not
Yeah.
we're not going to be hanging out together. But my professors became, one of my professors would bring her son to class.
Wow.
That was so empowering for me way back then
Yeah.
as a mom, because I was so like, should I tell people I'm married? Should I tell people I have kids? But seeing this Black woman bring her little son, her little chocolate baby, to class every day, and like there were times he was cutting up, but she didn't make it a hindrance. It was kind of like, I'm giving you a window into my life
Yeah.
and who I am, and how that enriches your experience with me. We
Hmm.
have a tendency as Black women to bring things as like, oh, please, I hope you accept this, or I don't want to ruffle the status quo, because people tend to make us feel like we need to feel oh so gracious and grateful anytime that we're in a room. But what
Yeah.
we know is we're never allowed into a room unless we earned our way in there.
Hmm.
So we should show up again with authenticity and with our full selves. And that is how we show to the existing community and the new community that we're creating that it doesn't have to be a battle between what it is and what it should be. It can be a meeting of the minds, it can be a joining, and
Hmm.
everyone has something to bring to enrich this community in some way. And all it does is strengthen the existing community and it grows
Yeah.
because we're becoming more accepting and because we have to
Yeah.
be, and that's it's not in our nature to leave sisters out, right?
Hmm.
It's not in our nature to be like we cannot leave our trans sisters out there by
We
themselves.
can't.
We
We
can't,
can't. And we won't. Yeah.
and we won't. That's just not who we are.
Hmm.
So we get to define it, right? We get to define the community. So when the community is pushing up against or accepting the old standards, we have to examine it and we have to love our community enough to say, these old standards might not be serving us in the way that we exist right now. Let's look at how we exist right now and if these things are serving us.
Hmm.
Because what we often will see is, oh, girl, that wasn't even serving us back then. We just were so used to it.
Yeah.
Okay? So we have this amazing opportunity to come together and reestablish what the community looks like and what those boundaries are, and
Hmm.
not continue to allow the next generations to have to be forced into those constraints, into those boxes that have held us back. You
Yeah.
define your femininity. Where
Hmm.
I'm not going to allow someone to define my femininity anymore. This is how I show up. I'm not performing femininity.
Hmm.
I own it, and this is what mine
Hmm.
looks like. Show me what yours looks like. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's totally different than mine, but it's still amazing, right? I have
Exactly.
room to do that now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. I love everything you said about that because we just, like you said, it's not in our nature to leave our sisters out. So why would we ever start doing that, you know? And like you said, like we often come kind of like already apologizing for existing, for taking up space. And we shouldn't. We should never have to do that because we know how hard we work to get into these spaces. So why would we ever apologize? Yeah. And since you did bring up social media before, do you have any thoughts about social media, the current state of social media, and how it affects our like a relationship, our outlook on relationships, trauma, anything like that that you want to add? Yeah.
I do. It's so worrisome in some cases. But what I realized is it is what you make it, right? It is what you make it. It's what you choose to ingest, what you
Hmm.
refuse to ingest, because anything that comes into our space, into our eye gate, into our mind space, we've now ingested it and it's going to have some type of effect on us.
Yes.
So making sure that you curate what you're seeing to who it is that you want to be, right? What do you align with, and not ingesting stuff that's problematic. I had to like have a really difficult conversation with a friend who was just sending me really traumatic videos. They were in line with, our work field.
Hmm.
She's a fellow doula, and
Hmm.
she was, so it was in the birthing justice line of thought, but it was just like bad things that were really negative. And because we have to deal with those things in real life, I had to just say, like, please don't send me videos like that, because it's bad
Yeah.
enough that we have to deal with difficult births and difficult practitioners in real life. I don't want to watch these things and then taint my thought process and my emotional zone with this negativity or these depressing thoughts when I then have to go into a clinical setting and
Yeah.
be the liaison between my client and their clinician, right? So it's going to always be what we make it, because there's so many negative things that we see out there. um I made a big caution to all of my mamas that I service and all of my friends, since in this current climate, like in this election season, we're seeing so many crazy things being said
Mhm.
about Black women and about Blackness, because of who our current candidate is. And we have to protect ourselves from that.
Yeah.
Protect yourselves. Like, know
Yeah.
how much you can take and know that it's okay to turn it off. And
Yeah.
know that it's okay to not have that conversation. And know that it's okay to not involve yourself in that. If you want to say, I don't want to be involved in this at all, that is an option. That is an option. So, it's always going to be what we make it as far as what we're ingesting, but as far as what we are creating, I think social media is a beautiful tool for us to empower each other, celebrate each other, share knowledge, share information, share encouragement, and to create safe spaces. Because the
Mhm.
people that we can't connect with physically, we can connect virtually with, love and compassion and support, in good times and bad. So
Mhm.
again, it's always going to be what you make it, and we get to choose how we use it and what we use it for. I
Mhm.
choose to always use it to uplift and empower. I love randomly just like sending some praise to some Black woman that I don't even know.
Yep.
She has posted like something beautiful about herself or about her babies, and you know us, yes, girl, come on.
Mhm.
Like,
Always. Yeah.
I'm her. I'm the lady
Yeah.
that you're walking down the street and I'm half a block away, like, yes, girl, come on, blouse,
Yes.
my
Yes. Always.
shoes. Right?
Yes.
I'm from New York, so
Always. Yeah.
we're big. We're
Yeah.
a lot.
I get it.
We
Yep.
can do that virtually. We can create communities virtually. We can support each other virtually. And that's the power of social media as opposed to the poison.
Yeah. I love that you also show the beautiful side because definitely like I think especially since I grew up on social media, I feel like I came into a time where like people my age, we were using social media avidly by the time we were in middle school. So we kind of grew up and had those formative years in it. So I've seen the really dark negative sides, but we know how it can propel a lot of positive things in the world. And it's just like now we have a space to be like, come on, girl, but online. Like we can literally do that online. I think that's really wonderful. And just to like kind of close off, I just want to ask, what are some strategies and techniques that you found to be really effective in just promoting these healthy dynamics and relationships between individuals when it comes to Black women? Yeah.
I think one of the most important strategies is when we think about relationships, thinking about nourishing our bodies. Think about the way you nourish your body, right? Again, health is a state of body, wellness is a state of being. You want to nourish your relationships the same way you would nourish your body. So I'm thinking about my body, right? So physically, how am I nourishing this relationship? How am I promoting a healthy dynamic with my body? Like, am I making sure that I'm not in physical harm? Or if this relationship is physically harmful, is this something that I need to remove myself from? Right? Mentally, how does this relationship impact me mentally? If I know that I value this relationship, but I also know that mentally and emotionally, sometimes it's challenging, though there's boundaries that need to be set there, right?
Yeah.
So, if it's, especially if it's something really valuable, listen, my daughters had to do that to me. She had to be like, Mommy, when you call me, please don't tell me nothing bad about daddy in the first 5 minutes. I'm like, okay. Right. But that's a
Yeah.
boundary for her mental and emotional well-being.
Hmm.
That's not what I want to hear in the first 5 minutes on a conversation with my mom.
Yeah.
And those are things that we can ask for in relationships that we value and that we want to keep. If we get pushback in that way, then that's a red flag of that may
Hmm.
not be a safe space for us. But we can, set those boundaries emotionally and mentally with the people that we care about. So we've done physical, emotional, mental, and then we think about like spiritually, meaning energetically, right? So maybe some people might use the word spiritual, some people might use the word energy. But how does this thing make me feel? Do I feel like I'm being poured into with this relationship, or do I feel like I'm always giving out? Right? Or do I feel like there is a good flow of reciprocity? Sometimes that is all that's needed to be said. I don't feel like this relationship is reciprocal right now. So maybe I need to withdraw, or maybe I need to be filling my cup somewhere else before I have this interaction, because this interaction can be draining.
Mhm.
So I go have a yoga class, or I go have my favorite little matcha, or something
Mhm.
that I know is going to fill my cup for me, body, mind, spirit, before I have this interaction, so that this interaction does is not as draining as it could be. Right.
Yeah.
But also really always taking inventory and stock of whether or not that connection and that interaction is healthy enough to set a boundary. Because
Mhm.
sometimes the interaction or the relationship needs to not the relationship needs to not have interaction while we get healthy, and then
Mhm.
we can reintroduce interaction with boundaries, right?
Yes.
Because that interaction, it might not be healthy right now. So let's step away for a little while. You think about boundaries, I'll think about boundaries, and then we can come back when the connection is healthy to establish boundaries, because it's like limping around on a sprained ankle.
Yeah.
Not going to heal. I'm just
Mhm.
limping around on it. I need to let it rest, get off of it, take the weight off of it, let it rest. Now, once it heals, I need a brace, right?
Yeah.
That's the boundaries, is the brace.
Yeah.
It needs a little bit of help so that it can get stronger.
Mhm.
And constantly reevaluating those boundaries as relationships shift and grow, they change. You may have a great type of relationship right now with your best friend, and then 10 years from now, if y'all are married and have kids, that relationship shifts and changes. What we need to establish new boundaries here, because now I got 3 kids. Girl,
Mhm.
can't be calling me on Friday talking about what we doing tomorrow morning because I have ballet practice, right?
Yeah.
Things change, and we need to reevaluate those. And when
Yeah.
we don't do that, that's how our relationships can be harmed. But when we do it, it enriches the relationship, and it just shows the other person how much we value that relationship.
Yeah. Oh, that analogy was so wonderful because I feel like people really don't think about our mental health and our emotional health in terms of like how it can be translated to our physical health. So that was like a beautiful, beautiful analogy. I love that. But yeah, thank you so much, Tiffany. This has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I just want to thank everyone for tuning into this episode of the podcast. We hope that you did find the conversation engaging and informative. And if you did find today's episode engaging, we encourage you to tune into our upcoming episodes covering topics like the impact of PrEP in HIV prevention and early HIV preventions for young girls. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us reach more listeners. Until next time, bye.